Oh, hey man. Continuing my revisiting Middle Earth MERP's source books and campaign modules and so on and so forth. This, out of my entire collection, is probably the only one that is missing its cover. I, for the love of Pete, do not remember how it came up missing, although I think I left it someplace and it got wet and disintegrated. It happens. Uh, where do you go to buy a replacement, right? No. I guess the main part though is the core of it's here. It's solid. It's one of the early books that I purchased in the series. Umber is the source book for the Black Numerian stronghold that's located to the southeast of Gondor. In the movies, they're briefly referred to as the Corsairs. You see a scene in the third movie, I believe, where these dark armored looking individuals are riding boats up a river, and that's who these people are. Of course, the movies don't do justice to the just what and who the Corsairs really are, and how much their existence dictates Gondor's own history. Um, and that's where this particular book comes in handy. The writers and designers at ICE, like I said before, they went to great lengths to get as much information from the Tolkien library, if you will, to flush out these works. These aren't, while they are a sort of fan fiction, and there are a lot of fluffed parts to them, they're all for the most part based in solid Tolkien fact and backstory. Uh, in the books themselves, there's probably a bit more brief mentions of Umber and the Black Numerians there than in the movies themselves, which is understandable. As a source book, this is like I said, a strategic location that historically speaking, is much older than anything in Gondor and Arnor at all. The Umber was established many centuries before the fall of Nermer, and it's the site where Arphazan, or however you wish to pronounce it, the Numerian king who led an army to Middle Earth to cow Sauron into submitting without a fight. And he landed his army at Umber and marched overland towards Mordor, and at which point Sauron saw the writing on the wall, and being the clever, devious psychopath that he is, surrendered, and then immediately started working on Arphazan's mind, if you will, corrupting him. The Umber itself, the history in there talks about the six Olgalarchs. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. They have basically a council of 6 people who rule Umber as the chief warriors or the chief whatevers, and the city itself is for the most part, an oasis on the coast, surrounded by the desert of Herod, which makes it very difficult for a land army to march on them across some of the more inhospitable terrain in central southern Middle Earth to attack the city itself. And one of the reasons why it's such a sea power, the Corsairs of Umber. The Umber itself was chosen, its location was chosen because it was a huge natural bay and a great place to support a naval operation of any sort. So, as the books go, material wise, it gives you a great insight into this, like I said, this little corner of Middle Earth that actually plays such a vital or crucial role in the development of Gondor itself. The Gondorian kings over the centuries have had varying levels of success of dealing with Corsairs. On a couple occasions, they actually occupied it. In the beginning of the Fourth Age, Aragon II, everybody knows as Strider, he leads a force there and conquers it, brings it back into the Gondorian fold, if you will, or under the Gondorian thumb. It also talks about the Black Numerians, and in and of themselves, that's more of a political body of people than a different people. What sets the Black Numerians of Umber apart from most of the descendants of Number in Gondor and the remnants of Arnor Gondor is the fact that it's still quite common, even into the Fourth Age, for these pure blood descendants of Number to live into their third century, which sets them apart from the average Joe Blow, whose lifespan is 50 to 90 years at best. So the this last bastion of pure Nurmer, if you will, many. Well, saying a number of the Arnorian kings and stewards take wives from this particular neighborhood because they're trying to breed back, keep their bloodlines as reasonably pure as possible, which is very difficult to do as the centuries creep down. The book material itself includes the NPCs for the current crop of sea captains of the Corsairs and their chief lieutenants, as well as a number of NPCs. It also has a fairly well-designed layout for not so much the city itself, although it does go into things like the typical shop, typical taverns, things like this that you would expect to find in this kind of book. But it deals more with the political and surrounding economy, if you will, of this particular corner of Middle Earth. Here you go, so a picture of the Bay of Umber. I wish I still had the cover for it because, it's that one, when I was young, I just didn't have an appreciation for longevity of this stuff. And if you consider that most of these things are going on 40 years old, the fact that they're in as good a shape as they are is testament to dumb luck more than anything else, because they weren't printed on solid stuff with the intentions of it being around 100 years from now. Most of the stuff was, it's second-rate cardstock and paper and some decent graphics and stuff from the day. And even in this case, this book, you may or may not see the pages are starting to yellow. Anyway, Umber is a good source book, good as a non-Middle Earth, non-MERP playing aid. It makes for a good city, a good seaside city for any hack and slash, or for that matter, for a number of neo-fantasy, neo-sci-fi fantasy genres. Just a moderate changeover of however you want to do the stats for the game systems and mechanics that you're playing, keeping in mind that back the filler, the storyline of the source book itself has no bearing on the mechanics. That's dealt with separately. So if you need to use those same NPCs, you can make some adjustments, or you can just roll up the new stats for them, use their name. But the backstop, the story, the descriptions, the adventures, interactions, and suggestions also apply to whatever system you choose to use. So, like I said, if you get an opportunity to pick up this book or any of its sister books, I highly recommend doing so, because if nothing else, it's an awesome read. It gives you a lot better understanding of, once again, an area that's not covered well in the movie or the book, yet plays an important role, a far more important role than what it appears. There's a reason why Aragon had to go south and deal with other threats to Minas Tirith, and why he wasn't there at the initial onslaught. This is why he went to the Stone of Urk and called in a favor with the undead and made history. And in part, it's because the not doing so, the Corsairs were going to threaten a number of coastal areas and southern core areas of Gondor, preventing much-needed troops to be rushed north as reinforcements. Because the larger portion, going back to the Battle of Pelennor Fields. One of the reasons why the Gondorian army was so thin there at the beginning is because a large bulk of the militia and regional combat forces had to stay near their major cities and ports. They had to stay at home to defend against people like the Corsairs, which were not to be taken lightly. And they were the reason they were so easily defeated isn't because Aragon has some natural super command and control training kind of thing. He's a natural leader, don't get me wrong, but he's no general, admiral, what have you. He doesn't have that kind of experience. No, he was able to pull in a favor owed to his lineage, brought the army of the undead, basically, who butchered the Corsairs before moving north to help relieve the siege at Minas Tirith. If the Corsairs had managed to get there, that meant several major key cities, including Pelegar, had fallen, and most of the central areas of Gondor was now under threat. So, just what I know from reading and my perspective on that. Good book. I hope you enjoy it. Get an opportunity, grab it when you can. I hope yours has its cover intact. Till later.